So the biggest challenge that people are facing joining us today are about giving feedback and motivating senior ICs with a pretty close tie, and it's a precise tie with managing someone with more experience and then retaining senior ICs. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for sharing that and help set some of the context. I just wanted to kick off by saying welcome. If this is your first time joining us, this is a special welcome. But if you've joined us for other events, we're so happy to have you back joining us. My name is Patrick Gallagher. I'm with the ELC team. I help produce all of our events, our conference, podcasts, and all of our other content. And as you might know and recognize, managing senior ICs is really, really challenging. How do we know that? Well, we surveyed hundreds of members of our community through our reserve program, and managing senior ICs was one of the most requested topics. So this is clearly a big challenge for many of us here. The great news is we are not alone, and you all here are evidence of that. And so we're here to solve this challenge together. And Cristina Scheau is joining us, and we'll be covering things like the common archetypes of senior ICs, all of the different approaches you can take to hiring, as well as how to effectively manage and support their growth. And so here's how it's going to go. Cristina will chat for about 20 minutes or so. And then we've invited a few different community members who will be joining us live. So you'll be able to take what you learn and then expand on it through the different case studies that they share. And so we'll also be incorporating Q&A throughout. So if you have a question and you want it to be answered, type it in the Q&A window. And so I'll be monitoring chat and Q&A and everything there. And if you'd like to join us live and we have time, we'll be inviting a few more people additionally. So if you'd like to join us as a live participant, raise your hand and we'll invite you up at that time. And finally, make sure you're taking notes, because at the end, we're crowdsourcing ideas from everybody here. And so everyone will be sharing one action they're taking to improve how you manage senior ICs. And this will have an exponential impact on the value that you get from our time together. Okay, let me introduce you to our speaker, Cristina Scheau. Cristina is the Director of Engineering Perception at Cruise. The Perception team builds cutting-edge systems and machine learning models to enable cruise cars to understand the world around them. Before joining Cruise, Cristina was leading a group responsible for relevance of search surfaces and recommendation systems at Facebook. She's built and scaled teams of over 100 applied scientists and engineers that have delivered significant contributions across Facebook's products. Welcome, Cristina. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and talk about this common management challenge that we all have. I prepared some slides, but I'm looking forward to hear some ideas from all of you. And let's hope that slides would work. Okay. Are you able to see my screen, correct? Awesome, all good. So as I mentioned, I'm super excited to be here with you. I hope we can discuss today the common archetypes for senior ICs, a few hiring tips, as well as how to set them up for success after they are hired. And in this presentation, I'm referring to senior ICs as principal level or L7 and above, but many of these tips can be applied through for more junior roles with deeper domain expertise than their managers. In my experience, every senior person is a little bit of unique snowflake. So unfortunately, I didn't find one size fits all management playbook. That said, I'm sharing some tips which worked well in my experience and hope it will help you, all of you. As I mentioned, everybody is a little bit unique, but in the same time, there are some patterns or archetypes which can be very handy when you are thinking at your organizational design and hiring plan, as well as supporting the existing senior people better. I would call them generalist, coding machine, domain specialist, fixer, but there are also a lot of variations in between these archetypes. So generalists are usually great tech leads of large scope projects across the company or organizations. delivering substantial impact for the business. In most of the cases, they are sought as technical mentors by many engineers. Another archetype is so-called coding machine. We've all seen this type, usually very productive, 110x engineer. They impress people around them, not only through the productivity, but also the quality of their code, being a role model for others. The domain specialist has usual expertise for one specific area. They are acknowledged world or at least regional expert of that area. Their impact is both direct, but also indirect, guiding engineers who have less expertise there. A key, for example, there are in many companies security experts that are domain experts in security, while the rest of the company is benefiting a lot of their expertise. But of course, depending on the field, there are multiple people that can be into this category. And the fixer, which is maybe not so common pattern, but I wanted to mention here since many of us have this in our companies. The fixer usually leverages their broad knowledge across the stack. Their typical work consists of small PRs of huge impact. They are trying multiple directions in parallel and pivoting fast towards the area with the highest ROI. Now, while having these archetypes in mind, let's talk about the hard task for many of us, how to hire such ICs. I want to mention that at this level, it's not a fast process. It is usually a long journey with multiple rejections on both sides. But if you do it right, it can be a game changer for your success and for the success of your group. You should also expect that your regular selling strategy will not work. Usually these people having different motivators than the junior ones. And also I want to reiterate that hiring the wrong person has a high cost at the senior levels, and it is important to be patient and find the right fit. And the first tip that I would like to share with you is before rushing to sell the role, try to understand well what is the right archetype and the background that for your role, who can be successful in your environment. Without this, you can spend a lot of the time and energy targeting the wrong profile, and the journey can be longer than necessary. Similar on the candidate side, understanding the deeper level, the intrinsic motivators. What would make the person leave the current cozy role where they perform great to join you? Is the mission of your company? Is the technology? Is life-work balance? Many people think that is compensation. This is rarely the case at the senior levels. While compensation, of course, can make a big difference, there needs to be something stronger to resonate with these folks to be able to change the job. Second hiring tip, investing in networking and building connections. As I mentioned before, the candidate that you'll usually want is someone happy at their current role and might not realize that a change would help. So having a strong network and keeping in touch with people from your domain makes this process way easier. Even after a candidate rejects an offer, a role you offer, it is very useful to keep in touch, since who knows, maybe the situation can change 1 year from now, or maybe you change jobs and you have different roles. And third one, this is counterintuitive, but I learned it from a great mentor and it works. Being transparent helps a lot. So senior candidates usually appreciate in-depth understanding of both of the opportunities they have for impact in your new role, but also the challenges that they might face in that role. If you do it right, it can demonstrate a depth of understanding of both the role as well as the individual strengths. And now, assuming that you're able to hire your awesome senior ICs, let's talk about how to set them up for success. One important part that you as a manager can help is making sure that your new senior IC is working on the right problem or scope. You need to offer context why it is impactful and connected with the company goals. You would also need to understand the strengths and weaknesses of your IC and how they would be exposed to the problem they are working on. And one common mistake is being spread too thin. Many managers, after finally they hire a senior IC, in particular a generalist, would add every single problem to their scope. Please keep in mind that still is only one person, and there is there isn't a lot of capacity for all projects in the world. Second area I would like to talk about is about offering resources. Like similar with more junior engineers, senior ICs need actually support and resources from their manager. A few common ones are aligning with other teams in the company on the project they are driving, pairing them with the right people. Moral support. Many of senior ICs keep a high bar for themselves and also for others, and they get pretty sad when they see a suboptimal solution. Being, their therapist can help. And of course, creating space for your senior ICs to contribute is always very valuable. And last but not least, coaching your senior ICs is still very important, similar like junior ICs. Typical areas where senior ICs need help are, one is about pushing themselves to go beyond what's possible and create a safe place for them to fail. So even if they are domain experts, kind of pushing beyond like what they know that it worked in their previous job or like previous experience that they have. Some are better than others, but usually coaching on soft skills is needed. Common areas of growth are communication, conflict resolution, and so on. Coaching is also needed for a common problem like scaling themselves. Most of senior ICs, while being productive for themselves, they might not have the skills on scaling. And the last topic I like to cover that is a common challenge for most of us is about performance management. These are general tips, but they are useful in particular for senior ICs. So the first one is about making sure that there is alignment on how good looks like early on. In particular for these levels, there is a high bar for good, and conversations upfront can be useful for making sure that there is not a mismatch of expectations on any other sides. If it's your first senior IC of a particular archetype, you might not be well calibrated for performance conversations. I would recommend to pre-calibrate if possible. If in the same company there are other people that have similar levels, it is useful to talk with them. If in your company this is not available, then getting insights from other companies is still very useful. And the third one, it's about ramping up. If the senior IC is new to the company, then there shouldn't be the expectations that from day one they are able to create the impact that they are capable of. So it is important to have a thoughtful ramping up plan and the expectations on accumulating information to match on both sides. And I think that's the whole content that I prepare up front, but I'm looking forward for the conversation and for your thoughts on this topic too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cristina. I know we have a ton of questions from all of the people coming in, both that have been shared ahead of time and both some that are coming through right now. And so we're going to be transitioning to our live participant session. So we have a few members that are going to be jumping in and sharing some of their specific challenges, and you'll be able to learn from their context and case studies how they're dealing with some of those different things. And so we should have time for some other people to join us. So if you'd like to jump in as a live participant, raise your hand and we'll invite you on for that. But first, we'll also have some time for the Q&A. So please also feel free to share your questions in the Q&A as well. So with that, in and share your challenge and what's going on and how Cristina can help. Sergey, it looks like we have
Yes.
you on mute. There you go.
Yes, I think you dropped a little bit in. Yeah, so I have a questions about senior engineers who grew very fast in their career. Some engineers go from like to senior in 2 years, then maybe like 1 more year to get to staff, and maybe a couple of years to senior staff, and then they get stuck. And when they realize that like getting to the next level might take 5 years or 10 years, so they will never get there. How do you keep them motivated? Because up to that, like they were like really motivated by the next, like some people were really motivated by the next promo, like the next, and now it's like, yeah, okay, like you're getting these expectations. So like everyone tells you like you're awesome, but you feel like you get stuck in your career. So how do you manage this, and how do you make sure those engineers are like motivated?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's definitely a challenge. Usually how I do is like when I describe what's the next level or the next step for their career, I'm trying to create a picture that is very motivational. For example, if we are talking somebody who is 7 or senior staff, for principal, they would need to push forward the industry that they are in. And that's, it is a hard bar, and it's exceptional to think that in 1 year you can push forward the whole industry, since there are so many people that work on that. So, but in the same time, presenting the reward of it and presenting like how impactful it would be if they do that, depending on the, of course, the industry and the company mission, connecting with what it means for community. For example, for machine learning, it's a strong community, and a lot of people are looking forward for new innovations to come in, and there is a lot of impact there. And preparing them that, look, it will be slow, but it is meaningful for you to strive to get there. For majority people, it's working, but for others, though, it's possible that maybe the next level might not be that inspirational. Maybe just trying on the same level, very different projects can be inspirational for them. They like to get a little bit more press and grow. For example, for people that were in a domain for, 8 years, 10 years, they might want to look at some point, I want to do a change, and now is the right moment, and helping them to do that lateral change in the domain at a high level and still be able to contribute to the impact. It's also keeping people motivated on that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sergey, for the question.
Awesome, Sergey. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate what you said, Cristina, about for senior engineers who maybe feel stuck or not motivated, painting the picture of the impact that they can make, I feel like is such a powerful way to generate motivation, because I know that is such a, that so many people have shared that with us ahead of time of like something that they're dealing with. That's awesome. Next up, we have Theo. Theo, do you want to jump in and share your challenge with Cristina?
Sure. Hey, Cristina. So a lot of organization mix management and leadership, right? And as a result, a lot of times, if you raise up in your responsibilities, you get to a point that in critical conversations, we invite the managers, directors, VPs, right? But we do not include ICs on similar levels. How do you handle this challenge and make sure that non-managing ICs having lead responsibilities get included appropriately?
That's a great question. Thank you, Tia. Yeah, so for us as managers, I think part of our responsibility is to include our strongest technical ICs in conversations and make sure that they have as much context as possible. What I'm doing, for example, for many meetings, like I'm working with my EA to know that if the meeting is about a technical domain, I want my principal engineer to be there. If it's about a different domain, I want my senior staffs to be there. So I am proactively thinking about how can I offer context in the beginning. Now, if indeed maybe that conversation needs to be with different audience, we can always distill part of that knowledge and still have enough space in one-on-ones or in other meetings like strategy meetings and so on, to bring that context. So later on, maybe even if it's not valuable at that moment of time, later on this context can be built so the person can do the right decision. But I do feel a lot of our responsibility as managers is to make sure that the senior ICs that we have in our organizations are having the full context and they can contribute at their best on the strategy and decisions that we are doing, since otherwise most likely we'll be taking the wrong decisions.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Awesome, Theo. Thank you. Cristina, we had a question come in through the Q&A that sort of covers the opposite of this challenge. So instead of trying to figure out how do you include a senior IC in key parts of the decision-making process and the planning process, this person has a coding machine archetype, but they don't want to transition to a more senior principal engineer role because they don't like communicating with other teams. So the big question is, how can somebody in that archetype grow their career? What can a manager do to support them?
That's a great question indeed, and most of us have seen that that person, that archetype. What I'm usually doing with this archetype, in general, it is very valuable. Like I wish we had more coding machines, like many things get done very fast with them. So one is to make sure that they are working on the right projects. In some of them, speed matters more than others. For example, when we are talking about prototyping a very novel idea, then it's worth having a coding machine prototype it in 1 week, and us as a team, we can do decision about is this direction promising or not. It's very fast versus having the whole team spend maybe 3 months to have slightly more polished prototypes. So making sure they are working on the most important problem that matches well their skill. The second part, I usually pair them with the generalist archetype, that Uber tech lead that is doing the conversation with product team, that it's usually connected with a lot of people. So both of them as pairs, they can have way stronger impact than each of them working individual on the project. Some people ask like, well, they have the same scope, how does it work, in particular since they are senior? I rarely, so when it's a really big project that it's with a lot of stakeholders and the company really wants to get it done, I rarely seen issues if the project is successful to not to give credit on both. But indeed, it is important the problem to be large enough to be worth spending 2 strong ICs time.
Thank you. And I really appreciate, I think, the strategic use of pairing them with another person who sort of complements that skill set, because I think that helps really close the gap or overcome some of the challenges that could come up with that way. So this, for me, the thing that occurs is like it's a creative use of other resources to help support the whole team, not just the senior IC. That's awesome. Well, we have a couple more participants. Brian, do you want to jump in and share your challenge with Cristina?
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Cristina, for giving this talk today. It's really awesome. My question is really about maybe managers who are sort of a little earlier in their career and experience, and particularly managers who've sort of transitioned from the IC role to managing senior ICs. And there are some sort of unique challenges that sometimes happen here. I have a manager that I work closely with who is a recent convert to management, and she struggles a little bit with generally feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome and so on when working with the most senior people on the team. And she sort of is particularly concerned about the sort of making sure that ICs feel like they have autonomy, but also making sure that there's alignment with, you know, what those senior ICs are doing and the sort of overall general direction of the team. So I'm wondering if you could touch a little bit on some experiences that you've had with that and strategies to deal with it.
Yeah, like, thank you for the question. It's indeed a really good question. So for most of us, I think if we remember that transition from IC to manager, it might have been rough. There is that time to adapt to this boundary between delegation and being as part of being on top of things. That boundary takes time to be learned. Usually what I've noticed that for the new manager, like the biggest fear is the fear of maybe not adding value. If they are not exactly on top of details and designing every little project, am I adding value? So a lot of my work on coaching was to explain that value is different and it's in different form, and it's actually beneficially long-term to leave enough space and room for others to grow while offering coaching instead of being directive. That takes some time, and different people struggle for shorter or longer, but it's one of the key mindset switches that people help with. For some other teams that might be smaller, what I noticed that it can work where the manager is a little bit hands-on on a small project that maybe has more junior ICs, while the other ICs are spending, the senior ones are spending time on different projects. So overall, they feel like as a team, we are still building the same big thing, but we kind of complement of who is on top of which details. But indeed, for majority of frontline managers, it takes some time to get comfortable of understanding also where are the boundaries, how many things can be delegated, because at the other end of the spectrum, a lot of people start delegating everything and then nothing comes back, and then they get frustrated. Well, I delegated, instead of having the right balance and understanding how much they can stretch their ICs that they support.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Awesome. Cristina, since we were on this topic, one of the things that you had mentioned while you were giving your talk was about creating different, creating space for senior ICs. And so we had Vinay asked if you could provide some examples of what that looks like with the different senior ICs that you worked with, and what that sort of meant to you as you've worked with all these different types of folks.
Yeah, like actually maybe the wording might not have been the right one for this slide, but what I meant by creating space, it's mostly creating room for the senior ICs to contribute even more beyond of the immediate projects that they have. And for example, for principal engineers, in general, they have, one big directions that they are driving. But on top of that, they can also set up cultural norms. They can set up norms of how code review should be done, how design reviews should be done. They can contribute to different parts of the strategy of the company just because they have enough context in the area where they are domain experts. That said, those opportunities don't come easily for them. So they would need you as a manager to highlight what would be the impact that would come from contributing also in other areas that are beyond their immediate projects that they are looking for. For me, I'm always trying to think of, like, when I see a problem, how can the best people that we have in the team play at their strengths to solve this problem? Do I have any gaps? How do we discuss about those gaps, and which role everybody should play in order to solve this problem? And as part of that thinking process, then you notice also opportunities. You notice that maybe your staff engineer can pick up a small piece of a senior staff, and it's great for them to grow. So then you created a new room, a new space, a new opportunity for them to stretch themselves. And for your principal engineer, maybe on an area that might be different than what they were great in the past, something that they always wanted to learn. And this time when you have the business problem, they have the chance of pushing themselves in that direction. So yeah, this is what I meant, to proactively think about opportunities for people to push themselves further than their current knowledge.
Great, thank you. We have another live participant in Mira. Mira, do you want to jump in and share your question?
Yes, thanks, Patrick. Hi, Cristina, nice to meet you. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, you mentioned setting expectations early on, and you talked a little bit about what is high bar like and defining that. To do these things well, I think there needs to be a very good feedback mechanism. So would like to get your thoughts around what is an effective feedback environment that you create, and how do you do that in a way that motivates these senior ICs?
Yeah, definitely conversations and frequent feedback is super important. We usually do very easily for junior engineers, but for senior ICs is as important. So I usually have for feedback like 2 channels. Like one of them, it's a public channel where something is, when somebody does well, independent of the seniority, I like to recognize in front of multiple people. Recognition, it is important. And even if it's, you know, part of their role, it's good to be, to set example for the rest of the organization. This is a good thing that we want to see. So this is for good things. We have like multiple recognition mechanisms, like it's always, you can always invent like one new form, but the key part is to be public and to have enough visibility on that. The other set of feedback is more like a constructive feedback. And on the constructive one, it's very, very important to be all in private setup. Otherwise, the person might not feel, I mean, most of us are not feeling comfortable with constructive feedback in front of other people. And I'm trying to keep it as objective as possible. What are my observations, or what was the perception that came from other engineers or maybe other managers involved, how it happened. I want to hear what the person thinks about it, and we can discuss and partner together about, is this something that we should address soon? Is it something that, you know, it's always area of growth, but maybe not as critical to be addressed immediately, or where on the spectrum it is? And this continuous kind of feedback and conversation helps also when we write our performance letters and everything. It shouldn't be that the content there is novel, unless, you know, it's something that it's something exceptional, but majority of the feedback should have been probably discussed before that.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mira. Cristina, so along the thread of creating environments for effective feedback, one of the questions that came in from Miles is really, it's like a two-part question for feedback. So the situation is, say a senior IC comes in with frustration with quote unquote lesser capable engineers. So what he's looking for is, you know, how do you help them overcome that frustration? And then the other side of that is also like, how do you get them to focus on the necessary problems versus their interest area? And how do you help navigate that? So like in a feedback environment, how do you help like have those conversations about those two particular problems?
Yeah, the lesser capable engineers. So that one usually requires some debugging, because it's either that indeed the, let's say you have somebody senior staff, you pair with a junior engineer that just learns to compile. Definitely it's a lot of, might not be that person, your senior staff might not have enough patience and time to coach the junior one. So it requires debugging on, is it a performance issue, and maybe the lesser capable, there is some reality there, and then there is some coaching that we have to do for the junior ones. Is it a part of the attitude? And then we need to have an open conversation, the fact that different people are at different levels of their careers, and for them to scale themselves, they need to be able to work with also more junior engineers that are still pushing their capabilities forward. So it requires, you know, private conversation in one-on-one, understanding the situation, and getting, in the end, if it's the second case, getting the buy-in that in order to do something bigger, it requires more people, and them as a senior, I see part of responsibilities to coach those people and make them stronger. So overall, as an organization, we'll have higher capabilities. So it becomes not only responsibility for me as manager to offer stronger people, but also we need to own the problem to make sure that we are in better shape. I think you had a second part of the question, but I forgot the details, if you mind.
Yeah, the second half, well, so first off, that was awesome. I think when you talk about like, in order to scale yourself, you need to work with and coach the other engineers. And so I think like that part, while a person may be frustrated in the moment, like showing like the only way you're gonna be more effective is if you do this. So if you truly want this big impact, here's how you do it. I think that was awesome. So the other part of the question, I guess the other sort of instance was, what if they're focused on, like, how do you get them to focus on the necessary problems or the most important problems in the business versus their area of interest? So maybe their interest area is not a priority for the business at the time. How do you switch that focus?
Yeah, I would say that this is a impact mindset, and I'm trying, even at the interview stage, to attract people that are motivated by impact rather than just building the next fancy thing that might not be useful for any use case, or doing something just for the sake of complexity, of trying something new instead of something that actually brings value to business. In order to continue cultivating this impact, it's important, of course, the recognition mechanisms to be there. Like I usually explain that if something is more complex but solves the same problem like something that would have been simpler and less fancy, then I definitely prefer the second option, and they shouldn't have spent time onto the overcomplicated solution just to get the same ROI. That might not be the most pleasant conversation, but it is important to set out the expectations that results matter more than how beautiful is the technology. And of course, I'm not talking about, reliability and stability and code quality. Those are different elements, but mostly on the complexity versus ROI. This can lead even to, messages like not being at expectations. For example, if somebody very senior is capable of delivering business impact, but in the same time wants to focus on some problem that most likely it's unconnected with what we'll be doing in the next few years, that, is part of the mismatch of expectations and needs to be highlighted as part of the performance evaluation cycle too. Of course, and for many people, when they don't want to spend into what is impactful, they might miss the context of why this impactful area can be also interesting and it's novel, and what is the new complexity. So sometimes it can work of just highlighting that the opportunity that they have on the impact, it's actually a combination of both a nice opportunity and the problem, it is interesting by itself, so it can open doors for other opportunities in the future.
Absolutely. I think the last point that you mentioned about if they have a misaligned sense of priority, they may have missed the context of why it's important. I think it's a really powerful way to put it. I had a quick follow-up question. Do you have a specific way you introduce that conversation if you have to, break their heart or tell them that, the technology they love is not important? Do you have a way you enter into that conversation?
Yeah, well, I think I've done it twice, mostly because it wasn't more time, but I actually rejected the interview phase. A lot of people that seem, I work in machine learning, so a lot of people feel that they are pretty attracted to the next big research idea. And in our case, we always said applied research. So I'm trying to gauge that skill well. How much you want your research to be actually applied? And are you sure you don't want to spend a lot of time in fundamental research versus actually applied one? So now, assuming that we have this person, the way I was doing was initially, more gentle, kind of more like probing the question, like why it is impactful what you are doing. And I wasn't, offering the answer that, look, this sounds to me that it will go nowhere. It's mostly pushing them to try to demonstrate how it would connect with the bigger picture. Try to show incremental impact, try to have some time boxing or something where you would know that maybe after 3 months you want to pivot or not based on the impact that you are able to see. once people get to that conclusion that, yes, I can time box it, in 1 month, I would have enough data and I would pivot to something else more interesting, then they get more comfortable of letting it go. And after that, when things don't come together, then that conversation, it is easier. But I'm trying to get a small buy-in that at some point we'll need to see what is the next pivot, and hopefully that pivot will be more impactful than the part that they are working on.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a few people had sent me a message about dealing with some of the emotional challenges with, having somebody in the part that they love no longer being important. And so I think helping gradually get them to buy in, I think makes it really tactical. Thank you. So we have one more live participant I want to transition to. Shashank, do you want to jump in and share your question with Cristina?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Patrick. Hi, Cristina. I was curious, how do you manage low-performing ICs?
Low performer ICs. These are nobody's favorites for sure. In particular on senior levels, the cost is high. So the more senior is the person, the higher is the cost for the team. In particular, people look at their senior ICs as role models, and then you see bad behavior, they model that bad behavior, and things are not going well. So I'm usually applying the playbook that is the same also for junior ones. Try to identify the root cause. Once that root cause is identified and we get on the same page of why is it happening, we go on a coaching plan. We have clear expectations about this behavior has to change, and based on the coaching plan, there are some milestones that this has to be proved. If this doesn't work out, then the best for both sides is to just, go in a different company. There are, for when we root cause the problem, there are big varieties of problems that I've seen. There are behavioral challenges, and those are harder to be corrected from my experience, but we still have, the same conversation in the coaching plan and the milestones that we want to see. There can be also root causes of, the setup and maybe the misunderstanding between their strengths and areas of growth versus the project needs, so that it is easier to correct, usually moving on a different project that is better aligned, then it can have the coaching plan can be more successful. There can be also, health problems, personal issues, and there it's nice to offer to people the company's resources on dealing with those type of cases. Sometimes it requires taking medical time off or like other solutions depending on the problem. But I think it is important on both sides to have these expectations and conversations that this type of outcome or behavior can't be forever in that form. So there is a clear path of how to make it different, and that path it's either through improving on the existing projects through coaching plan, or on different projects, or taking medical leave and coming back with the full forces. So like there are multiple options depending on the situation. But I encourage in particular for senior ICs, the performance problems to be dealt sooner than later, because the cost for the team, it is substantial if they don't fit.
That was helpful. Thank you, Cristina.
Thank you.
Cristina, related to the insight that you shared about moving them to a different project, one of the questions that came in was about, it was talking a little bit more related to senior ICs who maybe are not interested in the high impact business problems. So the question was, have you been successful in keeping them or transferring them to new jobs or new roles? Do you have examples that you could share of where you've helped focus a senior IC onto either a new problem that they're really excited about, or one that helps them address a more impactful problem for the business?
Yeah, so I've seen in the past, like sometimes, for example, when you are building applied research teams, maybe some people want to spend some more time on the fundamentals, and there is these people, they can, in my case, they wanted to do some business impact. It's just that they wanted on the side to continue pushing forward the fundamentals. In this case, it was easy because there was a different team in the same company that had the need of doing more fundamental research on that area. So it just felt like a win-win situation, both for the individual and for the company point of view. So I had that case, but I've had also multiple cases where it's more like a mindset, especially for people that just come from grad school, or like, it's maybe their first job, and it's more like a mindset change of instead of working on the most interesting, to just work on the most impactful. And that mindset can take some time to be changed, or if not, it's better for the individual to pick a company where those challenges are in different area.
Definitely. And along this line, so Mahesh shared a question about, because I imagine, like, if you're having a senior IC, working in a more ambiguous or a long-term project that's harder to quantify, that's oftentimes where some, like, what's the ROI and the impact that they make, those big questions come up. And so Mahesh had his question, their question was, how can you help a senior IC quantify the impact that they bring if they maybe are working on the glue work sometimes, it may not be impacting the top line of the company. Do you have any recommendations on how to help those senior ICs quantify their impact?
Yeah, so I would say for projects that are long-term, for example, my current company is self-driving company, so definitely a lot of the work is long-term. Many of problems we can't solve with, one small PR or a small project. Their milestones are very important, and even in area that is like high risk, high reward, kind of having timing for validating or invalidating a hypothesis, if this hypothesis is big, and deciding of when to pivot. So we celebrate if we are able to validate, or we celebrate that we are not able, we invalidated that one direction it is promising. That might have been 3 months of work. And if we look on absolute scale from company point of view, yes, there isn't new code that is on the car and makes the car drive better. We just invalidated that the direction is not promising, so we can spend more energy on something else that will in the end bring ROI. But having this kind of system upfront, so people understand of what good looks like even on milestone, it is very important, since otherwise everything can be into this gray area, like you can continue working in some direction that is not promising. You do not have the hypothesis well formulated or well experimented, so then it's harder to trace back to understand like what was at the core of the issue and why it's not working.
Great, thank you. So we had one more live panelist jump on. I believe, Leandro, would you like to jump in and share your challenge with Cristina?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Cristina, for sharing your experience with us today. One question, what techniques have you used in the past to gain respect among senior ICs when they are clearly smarter than you and you may be having difficulties to keep up with their level of technicality and expertise?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's definitely, initially I had also a lot of the time the imposter syndrome of like how can I support well a person that is way more qualified than me in one particular domain. But later on, I realized that look, management role and senior IC role, they are very complementary and different. And what we discussed before was about how we are able to add value as managers on top of the senior ICs, how we can offer them resources, how we can set them up for success, how we offer them coaching. They can't, it's, these are things that are super valuable, and usually when the person that is involved can see the difference between a good manager versus an okay manager or not so good manager. So once there is that mutual understanding and respect about what are each of us responsibilities and what that success looks like for each of the paths, then it's not too much, it's not a competition, because we are really talking about skills that are complementary, and we work with each other, we partner with each other to build something bigger than us. Most people that are actually deep in their domain and are very good, they are also, I haven't seen too much arrogance, or like majority, you know, is mostly on, I mean, they are also humble. Things can be off track when people don't agree with their manager. For example, you have somebody that has strong expertise on something, they want to work on a fun problem, not on a problem that matters for the company. As a manager, you nudge them like, look, this is a more impactful opportunity, and then it becomes, oh, it's because you don't like understand deeply my domain that it is. So those conversations are at the gray area, and it's mostly the fundamental conversation. It's about what do you want to work on, impact versus something fun and complex technical, which is a very different conversation than are you as a manager capable or not. So I would say that I'm looking at management roles and Senior ICs role as very separate tracks, and each of them have big challenges that are hard to be said which of the challenges are easier or harder. If you have that IC reporting to you, probably he's unhappy for a different reason.
I wanted, Leandro, that was an incredible question. And I think one that's, you know, in the background of a lot of people's mind is like, how do you command respect or earn respect for the different people? So I'd love to invite anybody in the chat, if you have other ways in which you've provided support, or because I think there's so many people here with experience that we could learn from. And for any of the panelists here, like if you have, you know, something that you've learned about either earning respect or commanding respect or supporting Senior ICs to help with this, I think this is, you know, this is a big question that everybody has to grapple with at some point in their management experience. So if any panelists jump on in, share any insights that you might have with this one.
So this is Theo, maybe I jump in. I think one wrong assumption we as engineers always have is that as a manager, right, or as a leader, you need to be the most technical person, right? Because as it was said before, in the management role, my role is not to provide the same output than the most technical IC. I do not agree. I know a lot of people who think like this. I disagree. My job is to enable my team to make them successful, remove their roadblocks, right? And give them what they need, and also take some of the tasks they don't want to do away from the management perspective. And this way, make sure that we as a team provide what needs to be done. If people see that value, they will appreciate you, independent of if you're more senior or not, because you fill a critical role for them. Not just they work for you.
I think that the gap that I've seen in the past is clarifying those expectations, right? Because many senior engineers expect you to perform also as a manager at that level, and that is not necessarily true, or not necessarily, you know, your role. So I think it's super important to clarify that upfront, not only as a team level, but as an organization as well, that the manager track, it's very different to the individual contributor track.
Yeah, thank you. And Theo, I think like underneath everything you shared as well is like the fundamental question is like, what am I doing as a manager to provide support? Is a very different question than what am I doing to get people to do the things I want them to do, I think. And so I just thinking about asking yourself the question of what are you actually doing to provide support, I think is interesting. Any other participants have thoughts they want to share?
This is Mira. What I'd say is things that have worked really well for me are a couple things, right? One is obviously sharing a lot of context, talking about the projects, learning what their interests are, where would they like to go, you know, what are some areas that they want to actually spend more time in has actually helped as well. So you pair projects a little bit better. It could be mentorship, right? So creating that environment has helped a lot. And then, much like the other panelists mentioned, the expectations, what's my role, what's their role, how can I help them on a project level or personally as they're trying to grow, has been helpful. So I act as a sounding board, to ideate and think about what could be done better. And those things I've seen have definitely helped.
Awesome. Thank you, Mira. Cristina, taking it back to you. So you had mentioned, we kicked this whole thing off about providing support and framing that as the biggest way to essentially earn and command respect is it's equal to the support that you provide. Of all of the ways that you've illustrated, what have you found to be the most effective way to provide support? Do you have a story of, something that you've done that made a huge difference for a senior IC that either transformed your relationship or transformed the state of a project?
Yeah, there are multiple examples in the past. So with a lot of projects, they really require cross-company alignment and resources. And while maybe the IC had the right idea, in general, without having the buy-in, many things don't come together. So I've seen it pretty frequently that the cross-team alignment and support, I had to do it for majority of senior ICs, most of them needed that help. Also for other projects, sometimes my previous senior ICs were pretty optimistic about, we do not need more engineers. We are tech leading 20, we are all good. This is a big project, it's big enough, we don't need more. But once you start more into the conversations, well, maybe this area can be parallelized, maybe yes, we can de-risk it a little bit. So you can realize that actually offering them more resources and cutting something else and moving more engineers here would actually make the project more successful. And in the beginning, my IC was like, yeah, let's try, let's figure it out. And 2 months in, he was like, well, he was so grateful that, we started that particular project had more funded from the beginning because that area happened to be actually a deep area. So it was it was good that they were able both to do it on time and deliver it on time. But that wouldn't have been possible with extra resources front-loaded. And that wasn't obvious from his point of view, but as a manager for us, sometimes it is easier to see different risks, and then we can move resources around in order to double down on some of the key ideas that matter more. So yeah, that happened for a few projects. A lot of them get also into the conflict resolution. There is another IC somewhere else and a senior and them, and they don't agree on this particular direction, and both of them are right and neither of them wants to converge. That's also a classic story that I think all of us seen. Of course, it requires time to figure it out of how to get on the same page, but majority of the senior level ICs that I've seen at some moment of their career get stuck into one of those threads. Yeah, those are in practice. If I need to think of E6 staff plus kind of seniority and their problems that they can get stuck is mostly on that side.
I have a follow-up question. Oh, sorry, you finish your thought, but I had a follow-up question related to the last point you were making.
Yeah, the other part is around on the pushing themselves to go beyond state of the art and state of what exists, as that requires the safety net from you as a manager, even if they, when somebody doesn't know if it will work or not, and they know that it's a high risk for the company, they, in order to, to continue and be able to be focused on pushing it forward, they require also that safety net to know that you are okay for them to spending time into that direction. So also, as I'm looking as a resource, also the safety net that you are providing for continuing pushing for one particular direction.
That's awesome. So when you were talking about the instance where you have different senior ICs who don't converge on the right path forward, I'm thinking of, here I am in this room and we're talking about something that I probably have I have less expertise than everybody else, and they're going head to head with very different points of view. How do you facilitate that conversation? Like when you're out of your depth with the topic and two people with very strong opinions and more expertise?
Yeah, like I'm still learning into that. I have like my current manager, he's amazing on that. I had also previous mentor amazing on that. So definitely something that, you know, we all need to grow on it. What I usually do is like I move the conversation at the first principles. Like, okay, so do I understand correctly that you guys are on the same page on this part? Are you disagreeing with the direction? Are you disagreeing with implementation details? Did you discuss pros and cons? So we move out a little bit of in the weeds, and we kind of move back to the first principles and kind of having more high level conversations. I like to give them time to spend together. So I'm asking like, okay, for next time, for the next review that we have, I would like these two areas to be sorted out. You guys to come up with 3 proposals. Okay, 2 of you have different proposals, come up with 3 options and discuss pros and cons. The fact that they have to spend time with themselves offline and, you know, have their own meetings and kind of come up with that document that has these 3 options, that itself, you know, will lead to good conversations. And when they come up with that artifact, then half of the problem is solved. But I'm trying to keep the conversation of which artifacts I want to see what are on the first principles, which are the things that we agree versus things we disagree, and you know, trying to move forward. Also, we have this concept of making sure that we disagree and commit on one direction. At the end of the day, when it's still one project, we still need to go in one direction, and being analyzing all the pros and cons, it's usually not a productive way of spending a lot of time. So once we identify that we go with option C, then we agree that as it's not a personal choice, like as an organization, we disagree but commit into this particular direction that we think it's a good way. In most of cases, we actually get to compromises. This option C, it's a blend between A and B, or it's something very different that they didn't have before. So while everybody is strong opinionated in different directions, when people are spending enough time together and discuss technical challenges, they come up with better options that solve the trade-offs better.
Thank you. My stress level just reduced pretty tremendously just thinking about that conversation, because I think there is, like, zooming out and setting up the structures of both facilitating the conversation and getting it to a more higher level, having them work it out in some ways and giving them the structure of the different proposals, and then having the backstop of disagree and commit. Whatever we have to move forward, like, we have to commit to it. So I think that to me feels like there's some tools that you could apply to help facilitate the decision there. So one other question that has come in. So when you were talking earlier about like helping support the growth and development of senior ICs, one of the things that you had mentioned as a common area of development is around soft skills and helping support the development of that. And I think what we were just talking about is, you know, when you have people that disagree with the direction, or in other ways, like when you're talking about being their champion and helping get other people bought into their idea for the senior IC. Do you have any tips on how to support the development of soft skills for people who want to grow in this? I guess any insights there on supporting the development in that way would be awesome.
Yeah, so I think soft skills, you know, it's a broad range and different people struggle with different things. Some people struggle with English. It's funny how many, I think I remember 2 or 3 conflicts that are purely communication and English challenges rather than actually, differences in intent, and then sending them to English courses is actually the most effective way. Other folks are more on like, if we think of conflict resolution, or if we think of like partnering with other teams, those things are, it takes time to build such soft skill, but once we agree that it's something we want to grow in, the project that you have currently can offer this opportunity for you. Try to see how it goes. Try to write down somewhere how, the progress that we've made, and let's have that conversation in a few months and think like, looking back, did you do any progress on it? Usually if we have a coaching framework towards it and we highlight how the project exposes that opportunity of growing, then people start being mindful of that opportunity and try their best to push themselves to be better. For example, somebody that just was in a conflict with maybe a junior engineer, next time when they partner with another junior engineer, then they can, since it's new ground, they can behave differently, and they can see if some different behavior would play better. So, but usually it takes time. It can take years depending on the skills that they are trying to grow.
Thank you so much, Cristina. I wanted to transition the conversation a little bit, and I would also love the input from our panelists as well for this next topic, because a lot of the questions that have come in are a lot about how do you help cultivate, like how do you get a senior IC to help mentor and support the development of other people in the team? So expanding sort of that coaching. So one specific person, Brian, is specifically, he's trying to partner a senior IC with a less experienced one, with somebody who has really incredible potential to develop into a really talented, like a really high contributing team member. And so what he's looking for is like the types of projects that might be the best for those pairs to tackle. So if you have an idea of, I guess, the different types of projects or things to help them work together on, where there can be that context sharing and that learning. And so do you have any insights on the most effective ways to help cultivate that type of mentorship environment?
Yeah, like, different projects are at different stages. I would say that things that are very risky and require a lot of domain depth, those are not great for these pairs. Usually what I'm asking my senior ICs is to de-risk those key components and create kind of macro frameworks, take the bigger problems, split in multiple smaller pieces. And once those are defined and we agreed on, and those parts are de-risked, then in a smaller piece, then the junior person can come in and shine on a problem that is way better defined. But it is important to have that conversation that the senior person needs to reduce the complexity, since it is a problem that is way beyond the current capabilities, and we don't want to set the junior person for failure. So having that conversation and balance and making them practically think of that, it's usually kind of the first part of the story. But yeah, projects can be diverse. Some people don't want to have that on projects that have strict timelines. I do feel like in a lot of companies, there are always some strict timelines. So it's that might reduce a lot of the opportunities. So I'm usually trying to, even for projects that have critical deadlines, a lot of leadership visibility, try to still have these pairs of coaching, because it's kind of the day-to-day work. And after this project, there will be the next one and so on. So I'm hoping to offer visibility both to junior and senior folks.
That's great. Thank you. And we had another anonymous question come in about like, how do you react or coach a senior IC who mostly talks about like their scary independent projects that frightens the junior engineers. And then so I think like helping coach them on reducing complexity, breaking it up into smaller pieces is a really good way to help them with that. Do you have any other insights about like how to intervene and like help them talk about those projects in a way that doesn't scare off junior engineers, that maybe those things are above their ability level?
Like making sure, so it's still part of the soft skills, but making sure that on the asking back if the junior engineer is excited and understood the exact problem. It's weird how many details and things get lost in communication, even if maybe the area that is asked is not as complex. Maybe the junior engineer might misunderstand or might not be familiar, and kind of asking back to see like how the person feels, like if it's excited answering questions, then that solves a big part of the question of the problem. Offering also resources like usually if there is documentation or if there are previous projects that are similar, most people get more comfortable if they know that there is a role model that they can follow. Making it also safe. So if the senior engineer is making it safe that if there are challenges at code review or design, they will discuss upfront, and they will be there for them. That reduces part of the nervousness because many problems can be solved at the design stage, or at the coding part. There can be work that is done upfront. So overall, the outcome it is there, but making it safe. So if there is error or mistake, we know how to correct it.
Definitely. A follow-up question for this is, if we're along the line of supporting the growth and development of senior ICs and helping them grow and develop other engineers, do you have any tips on, so Anisha, her question, their question is about, can you give tips on how to coach someone on pushing beyond what's possible and scaling themselves? So you'd mentioned a lot of this during your talk. How do you help people expand their concept of what's possible?
Yeah, so there are two parts on what's possible. Sometimes it is purely on the technology, like how, for example, in applied research, a lot of problems are, we do not know if we'll be able to solve it and how good we can solve it. Nobody knows, like there isn't enough research in this space. It's a unique problem. And the other part of the unknown on pushing themselves is about the scale of the project. If it's something that they are uncomfortable working with large amounts of people, and they don't know if they would be able to make a project of 20 people come together, since if in the past they worked only on projects that are, I don't know, 5 people. So those require kind of different approaches. I'll talk about the second one since it's a little bit easier. On the second one, what I usually do is like, there is this concept of Uber tech lead. So you can create a mini other structure. If you have a project of 20 people and in the past you used to work only with 5, then in these 20 people, you have some mini tech leads that are responsible for smaller components that are already de-risked, and you still work only with 5 people, but these 5 people are tech leading the project. So they move on in the role of being frontline in all details to being a little bit more detached, but still being close enough with other mini tech leads, and designing still the project pretty well in the beginning, because otherwise the project would not come together. So teaching them how to work through structure, it's usually something that helps. Or sometimes the challenge is like, maybe they didn't work with, they worked always only with junior engineers around them, but not with other 5 other seniors. And then the concept that we usually discuss, it's about divide and conquer, and still having somebody that comes with a major design, but after that dividing and conquering, so people know which components to focus on and they can work in parallel. So those are more like project management, I would say, skills, and some people, pick them up sooner or later. The first part about pushing forward the technology, that indeed is more tricky and depends on the domain, because in some cases, indeed that area will never work, and then if they spend half a year more the outcome would be the same. So then doubling down and creating this safe space for them to be forever into that place is not actually the best, neither in their interest, in their future growth, neither in the interest of the company. That said, like in many areas, it just feels like it is promising enough. And then again, making it safe to spend more time on it, trying to do it further, asking like, are you sure this is the limit? Are you able to come up with something better with the new idea? We have this prototype. Maybe let's try it and see how it goes, and so on. So kind of pushing to see like, are you sure you explored everything that was in your reach, or do you have some other idea on the back of your mind? And sometimes you can see that, oh yes, there is this other idea on the back of the mind that might be very promising pivot. It's just that they felt too shy, or like they didn't feel comfortable. They need a soundboard to know that, well, it's something that it might be realistic and it might be worth trying and learning from the data if it works or not. So that's on the how we push forward the technology, but it is you know, I would say that it's less systematizable, the first one, since it's tied to the type of the technology you push forward. If it's product work, then as engineer, you have kind of different tools than if it's applied research or if it's infrastructure. So there is some domain differences there.
Thank you so much, Cristina. I know we have thrown so many questions your way with rapid fire. We have a couple more, but wanted to turn this one to the participants because you've spent a lot of time talking about motivation and diving into how, like, providing good context and illustrating the impact in a ton of other ways. One of the questions that came in was like, how do you motivate senior ICs remotely? And so I wanted to first turn to our participants, for everybody who's been joining us live, to learn if there's been anything that you've been doing that you found to be effective in terms of maintaining motivation with senior ICs, specifically remotely. So if you're joining live, jump in and what's working.
Sergey, you go first. Either way,
okay.
it's fine.
Yeah, I just like what worked for me is to have like more often check-in, because like with the senior engineers, when you're in the office, you often talk multiple times a day. When you just like bump in the hallway, like in the kitchen and so on. Like what I found is that you just need to maybe meet twice a week. And sometimes when we have some questions on a messenger, sometimes we say, do you want to do quick VC, and just have a 5 or 10 minute VC chat, which is often I think helps to keep this connection, which we often I think people complain often that they lose in remote environment.
And I can maybe add to that. The first part is understand motivation, right? Understand where anyone on your team comes from, right? If you understand what motivates them, where they get this satisfaction, where they have the fun, what they like to avoid, it helps to know how to lead them, right? The second part, as you said correctly, we have a lot of unintentional interactions if we're in the office. They don't happen for us right now, right? We are all remote. So how do you make them happen? How do you do the virtual coffees consciously, right? To build these relationships and keep the relationship and make sure you understand what's going on. Because if you don't, you maybe don't see if your employee, if your senior IC is not in a good role. So that's a little bit of my learnings.
Thank you, Theo. Any other insights from our live participants?
In my case, specifically to remote ICs, I think there are a couple of differences when they are remote and in opposite time zone, or whether they are remote but they share the time zone. So what I found is that sometimes it's actually an advantage. So in my particular case, we discovered that one of my remote senior engineers was sharing the time zone, was overlapping time zone with a lot of other engineers as well that needed help related to the area of expertise of this person. So then we realized, why don't you become that, reference, technical reference for the people that are in that time zone that need help from you. So we identified an opportunity related to the fact that he was remote. So I think when somebody is remote, I think there are a lot of opportunities that can show up around it. If this is an opposite time zone, I would expect that there's some other people around in that time zone as well, not the only one. So a couple of things can happen, but letting them become like a personal, like a technical reference for people that may have, like a similar background or maybe located in a similar country or city might actually be a benefit for the rest of the team.
Thank you, Leandro. The last point makes me remind, like, you're making them a technical reference sort of also gives them a sense of importance and value, and that like they're a huge source of knowledge for the team, and that also kind of inflates the I'm really valued. So I think it's a really powerful tactic. Cristina, what do you have any insights about remote motivation in the context with senior ICs?
Remote motivation. Yeah, COVID is having a toll for all of us. It's definitely challenging. I've seen it working indeed more human interaction. Like before, for example, I wasn't using phone that much, like calling somebody from work. It felt a little bit unnatural for me. Now it feels like much more natural. We have something to talk. Well, let's have a chat. Let's have enough context. Let's use VC where possible. But if the question is at 9 p.m. for me or something, I'm fine to have a call and have a real conversation about it. So human interaction and connection, it is very useful. There are also the team-wide events that can help. So this is not specific to the senior IC, but in general, if the senior ICs are part of teams, then it is important to have a little bit more than before. For example, happy hours. Yes, happy hours can be still remote. We can still celebrate at the end of the week. We can have virtual offsites. We can have more stand-ups than our usual ones. We can have more meetings where we discuss, maybe strategic changes or others. But it is important to keep as much human connection as possible and try to replace some of the events that work naturally in the office with other fun ways and creative ways of doing. I managed in the past also remote teams, and for remote teams, I try usually to have a local structure. It's very hard if a team of 10 people has 5 in one place and 5 the other, and the manager has to be only in one place. I prefer more the setup where the manager is in the same place with the team, and then as a larger group, the remote group can be split across 2 locations, but small teams can be in 1 location, so people can work with each other closely, they can unblock each other and so on. I understand that this is not possible in all setups. It's just I usually encourage to go towards that level of org structure since it makes everybody's life easier.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cristina. We are getting close to the end of our time. We have a little bit of time left that we're going to use in a really powerful way. So this was one of our most requested topics. As you can tell, there are tons of questions with the challenges that people are dealing with. And I think the powerful thing about that is that you are not the only one faced with this challenge. And the good news is we have, 75 people here with ideas to share. And so the way we're going to close is by creating some exponential impact. We have great insights from a ton of different people with tons of different contexts to apply it to. And this is where community, the power of community is. So in the chat, I just shared a Google Doc with a list, just a very simple Google Doc for you to fill in the actions that you're going to take or the way that you're going to apply some of these insights. So I'm inviting you to share that, share the takeaway that you had or how you're going to apply that. For me personally, the biggest one was about motivating by illustrating impact. And so the thing that I'm going to be doing differently is whenever I'm in a meeting talking about future plans or projects, to start with, here's the impact in painting the long-term importance of why. And so take a second, write that down. Oh, we've got some awesome action going on. Brian, it looks like you've you've written down something. Do you want to jump in and share the action that you're going to take?
I was just going to say, like, all the stuff about breaking people's hearts is kind of was really impactful for me in the nicest possible way. But I think like helping senior ICs to sort of, I've definitely been in this situation as a senior IC, and I've observed other senior ICs being in this position where you just get this pet project that you're super passionate about, and you end up just going down that track. And I think these ideas around time boxing and sort of understanding the business impact and sort of helping engineers to sort of understand that too. I think that's something that I really took away from this, and I really appreciate all the commentary on. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Anybody else jumping in live? Do you have any insights or actions you're looking to take?
I really like something that Cristina mentioned about like projects that are like not specific for a feature or a small product, but more like driving culture. Something like, like allowing senior engineers to, decide what are the code review guidelines or best practices. I think that's amazing because that is impact, right? Like that doesn't cover only your team. It could cover an entire organization. So I think that's, to me, like resonated a lot, and I really like that idea. So I'm probably going to start exploring, things around that.
Yeah, I like the idea. I like the framework that Cristina provided for the resolve the conflicts when you have a conflict between two senior engineers. What steps you can take to kind of like to drive the resolution, and like try like force them to come up with more solutions, to talk to each other. Yeah, like I really like that framework.
Awesome. Well, we are close to the end of our time. One quick announcement before we sign off, and Cristina, I'm going to ask you to leave us with some final words in a moment. But on our next event is August 19th, and it is with Bela Labovich, and she'll be talking about purposeful leadership in high-performing teams. She's VP of Engineering at Athena Health. Jerry and I had a conversation with her today, and the topic is going to be really powerful about applying thoughtfulness into all different elements of your teams and leadership. So we invite you to join us on the 19th. We'd love to have you there. And so we'll include the link to that in a follow-up email with the video for this. So we'd love to see you there. But if you are not on this Google Doc right now, there are some incredible things happening. There are some incredible takeaways going on. So everybody who is in there sharing, the anonymous crows, alligators, otters, and cows out there, all writing down their insights. I just really appreciate seeing the motivation, and it's helping me retain a lot of what we're learning a lot more. So with that, Cristina, can you help us sign off? Do you have any final words you'd like to share about managing senior ICs?
Thank you so much for having me here, for having the conversation. I would love to learn more from all of you. I do feel this is a challenge that all of us as managers we are facing, but we are not alone. We are all together. So looking forward to grow in this community and share with each other more. So thank you so much for inviting me here.
Thank you so much, Cristina. And thank you all so much for joining. Keep looking at that Google Doc. There's some awesome things going on there, and we'll see you all next time.